Have you ever felt that chill of sudden silence from a man who seemed perfectly in control, only to find yourself tangled in confusion, heart pounding, and yearning for clear answers? That curt nod, that unread message, that subtle withdrawal each moment leaves you questioning what just went wrong and why his emotional walls feel impenetrable. Welcome to the hidden realm of the masculine ego, a fragile fortress built on pride, yet trembling beneath its veneer of strength. In this video, we'll peel back psychological layers and expose why the proudest men crumble in the face of genuine strength. You'll discover the unconscious dynamics of the masculine ego and vulnerability revealed through Carl Jung's profound insights, the unexpected power of silent withdrawal, and why withholding praise shakes his world more profoundly than any confrontation. The precise gestures that trigger deep-seated anxieties and how you can wield them with poise to inspire genuine longing. A proven three-step strategy to harness this sacred tension and build a connection based on mutual respect, not codependency. Stick with us till the end to learn how mastering this interplay can deepen emotional bonds, ignite his conscious desire to appreciate you fully, and avoid the common pitfalls that derail authentic connections. If you haven't subscribed to our channel yet, please click the subscribe button and ring the notification bell to stay updated on all our latest content. The masculine ego doesn't always announce itself with blustering arrogance. More often, it slips into subtle gestures, a curt nod, an unspoken withdrawal, a chill of sudden silence, an almost imperceptible shift that leaves your heart pounding with questions. I've seen it countless times in friends, lovers, even colleagues, the man who appears to have everything perfectly under control, yet whose eyes betray a flicker of fear. Because what masquerades as composure is, in truth, a trembling heartbeat of anxiety. At its core lies a raw, aching vulnerability, the terror of being laid bare, the dread that someone might glimpse the one secret he would never admit, his deep, unsettling longing for a woman who goes beyond flirtation, who penetrates the hard shell he spent his life constructing. When she walks into his world, her presence isn't just another pleasant encounter, it's an earthquake that rattles the foundations of his carefully fortified defenses. She awakens a part of him he has long suppressed, the tender, emotional side he's never allowed himself to feel. In my opinion, this is a tragic irony. The very armor that has protected him from heartbreak has also imprisoned him in isolation. Few women truly understand that the masculine ego, for all its bluster, is as brittle as fine china, fragile, not because it lacks strength, but because it was painstakingly built as a defensive fortress. He was never taught to acknowledge his feelings. He was raised on stories of conquest, perseverance, and independence. So when a woman offers genuine tenderness, tempered with self-awareness, when she gives herself not out of need, but out of choice, the equilibrium shatters. This isn't about manipulation or some cruel emotional punishment. It's about grasping the profound psychic landscape of a man's heart. Carl Jung, whom I deeply admire, reminded us that the soul longs to complete itself through another. Often, a man projects onto a woman the figure who can either lavish him with redemption or force him to confront his own shadow. When she refuses to stroke his ego with endless praise, when she won't kneel in emotional dependency, she becomes that mirror he cannot ignore. And oh, how that mirror wounds him, because in truth the ego craves power, not necessarily over others, but over itself. It yearns to be admired, needed, and safe from the terror of uncertainty. So when you, as a woman, choose to withdraw your constant validation, when you stop adapting to his unspoken expectations and refuse to chase his attention, the cracks appear. In that moment, a new dynamic is born. You are no longer the woman who waits, you are the one who decides. You are no longer dispensable, you are mysterious. That mystery is not a petty game of cat and mouse. It is the natural consequence of a woman who knows her worth, who won't settle for crumbs masquerading as affection. For a man trained to control every narrative and predict every outcome, Such a woman ignites an internal revolution. He cannot possess her, cannot script her reactions, and that realization both terrifies and enthralls him. When you step away with quiet dignity, no reproaches, no dramatic confrontations, no desperate explanations, you activate something deep within his unconscious. Your absence is not an empty void. It is a vivid psychic presence, an echo that reverberates through his thoughts and dreams long after you're gone. That echo is a haunting reminder of what he risked losing, not just you, but the version of himself who dared to feel. According to Jung, what eludes our rational mind transforms into a powerful symbol. When you become that symbol, a living embodiment of choice, strength, and authentic emotion, you are no longer simply a person in his life, but an internal experience, a soulful call to growth. And that is why it hurts so profoundly. He doesn't miss only your physical presence. He mourns the shattering of the control he once clung to. You weren't just another woman in his story. You were the catalyst who challenged his ego at its most vulnerable seam. Encounters like that are never forgotten. He may rebuild his life, forge new relationships, even smile again, but something deep inside him has irrevocably changed. Because once a man has truly encountered a woman who doesn't need him but consciously chooses him, he can never again satisfy himself with anything less. In that hollow where his ego once ruled with iron certainty, there now lies a fissure, a quiet, aching wound that refuses to be plastered over by pride or smoothed out with excuses. It blossoms instead with relentless questions. Why didn't she insist on answers? Why didn't she wait, hold her ground, call him back? How could someone capable of genuine love simply turn away without a backward glance? I've watched men wrestle with this silent torment, and it's heartbreaking to see how logic offers no solace, because this is not a problem of reason, it's a wound of the soul. The masculine ego is designed to mask emptiness with admiration, dominance, and unshakable certainties. It thrives on the illusion of power, convincing itself that every gap will be filled, whether with flattering words, unwavering loyalty, or your unquestioning presence. But when a woman chooses to protect her heart instead of surrendering it unconditionally, when she gracefully steps back instead of pleading for attention, that carefully constructed fortress suddenly finds itself facing a void it cannot control. Remarkably, this emptiness doesn't terrorize him in the moment. He initially shrugs it off, busying himself with routine distractions, repeating mantras of, "I'm fine," and "I've got this." Yet beneath the surface, a subtle shift is underway. I've come to understand that a woman's silent departure is never truly silent. It reverberates through his unconscious, like the tolling of a distant bell. Carl Jung taught us that symbols wield more influence than any spoken word, and in this symbolism, you become so much more than a mere person. You become an echo that haunts every corner of your mind. Your unfelt laugh, the text he dismissed, the glance he overlooked, all of these become charged with a new, almost painful significance. Suddenly, that unanswered message looms as a manifesto of your self-worth. That small smile he once took for granted becomes an emblem of something irretrievably lost. He no longer pictures you as just her. You transform into the woman who refused to be a doormat, the woman who left without drama, the woman who chose herself over his approval. And that unpredictable spirit, so unlike the safe, scripted partner he thought he knew, is exactly what disarms him. The ego cannot reconcile with what it cannot manipulate. Now, he finds himself grappling daily with the absence you never fill. There are days when he catches himself reaching for his phone, only to remember you're not a message away. There are nights when the stillness of his apartment echoes your unspoken presence, and he realizes with a pang that it was never about winning you back. It was about confronting himself. Because in choosing not to beg, not to rationalize, and not to demand explanations, you handed him a mirror far sharper than any words could ever be. And that mirror, cracked though it may be, reflects the truth of who he is, and, more powerfully, who he could become. In that trembling space of uncertainty, A strange and irresistible fascination takes root, not because you were flawless, but precisely because you were unlike anyone he'd ever known. While countless others scrambled to etch themselves into his memory with grand gestures and pleading words, you did something far more daring. You simply vanished. And in that profound silence, you revealed the true value of your presence, an unspoken testament to your strength, your autonomy, and the quiet force of your character. If you are still watching this video and find these lessons helpful, please comment number 1 below to let me know that you are still watching this video with me. I believe this is where true magic happens, not in the spectacle of love, but in its absence. As the echo of your departure reverberates through his consciousness, the masculine ego, once adamant in its desire to possess, begins to shift, crafting emotional bridges back to you. But these aren't bridges built on conquest or control. They rise from a genuine, heart-squeezing need to understand. He yearns to know who you were, why his eyes remained blind to your worth when you stood right beside him, and which corner of his prideful fortress refused to acknowledge the treasure he held in his hands. The answers he hunts for aren't scattered in postcards or whispered in your absence. They lie deep within his psychic journey. Because you didn't inflict just another heartbreak, you orchestrated a symbolic rupture, so potent it shattered the illusions he clung to. You confronted him with the limits of his power, all without a single raised voice, without blame, without tearful pleas. You showed him that your essence was not something to be owned, nor a gift to be begged for. It was a presence that could resonate long after you left the room. That, to me, is the most profound form of presence, the kind that perseveres in absence, the kind that refuses to fade, because it has imprinted itself on the deepest fibers of the soul. Carl Jung once taught that the unconscious seeks its wholeness through the other, and when that other arrives with an emotional confrontation so raw, so authentic, the mind cannot and will not let it go. It recognizes that something real has occurred, something that brushed against the hidden chords of his psyche, awakening feelings he never knew lay dormant. You didn't just trigger a momentary crisis. You dismantled his entire sense of identity. You transformed from the idealized woman of his fantasies into the astonishing reality that disarmed him. Deprived of easy answers, his ego begins weaving intricate fantasies, imagining you hand in hand with someone else, measuring every smile he once took for granted against the phantom of what he lost, replaying stolen moments in his mind with a painful new intensity. Each memory becomes a testament to a loss so profound it defies logic and transcends explanation. And that, I think, is the unbearable sting. The masculine ego, stripped of its emotional armor, faces the naked truth of vulnerability. No mask remains to uphold pride, no script to follow, no line to deliver. In that stark exposure, he realizes that the deepest wound isn't the absence of your body. It's the echo of your presence, the whisper of your strength, the haunting knowledge that he can never reclaim the version of himself who believed he could contain you. He didn't, and he simply cannot erase you from his mind. Not yet, at least, because love in its fullest bloom still lies ahead. What holds him captive now is far more primal, more haunting, your presence lodged deep within the wound that refuses to heal. In my view, this isn't a cruel sentence, but a profound revelation. Through that aching fissure, he suddenly recognizes parts of himself he once staunchly denied, his relentless urge to dominate, his stubborn refusal to lay down arms, his secret terror of ever being seen with raw, unvarnished authenticity. You stood before him as that uncompromising mirror, not one that flatters with gentle curves, but one that shatters illusions and exposes every crack in his armor. And faced with this unflinching reflection, his ego, for the first time, begins to yield. I find it remarkable how Carl Jung called this transformative path individuation. The moment a person stops projecting their hidden conflicts onto others and starts owning the fragments of themselves they once cast aside. You didn't simply confront him in passing, you became the catalyst, forcing him to embark on that arduous, extraordinary journey of self-integration. That's why, even if he never utters a single word about it, even if he pretends in public that nothing has shifted, the man he is today is irrevocably changed. Somewhere deep in his psyche, he senses a subtle pull, an unspoken knowing that since you walked away, something profound has unfolded within him. You didn't slip into the realm of mere memories. You transcended into the realm of symbols. And as Jung so powerfully taught, symbols don't fade away like old photographs, they live on as invisible currents, steering our deepest motivations and actions. Consider the invisible crossroads in the masculine soul, where fierce pride meets unbridled desire. No bouquet of flowery words or grand promises can ever reach that juncture. It is accessible only through the profound quiet of absence, the charged distance of unreturned calls, and the dignified act of renunciation that speaks louder than any plea. When a woman attains that rarefied state, not with bitter vengeance, but with serene self-awareness, the man's ego doesn't crash in an explosive tantrum, rather, it erodes. First imperceptibly, then devastatingly. It crumbles from within. While he may insist with every breath that he's unshaken, a vital piece of him has already begun to soften. That softened piece is his shadow, the forsaken fragment of his soul, the repository for all that he deemed unacceptable or too vulnerable to face. And you, by choosing to leave rather than plead, by embodying unwavering self-respect instead of needy desperation, you delivered him straight into the heart of that shadow. You showed him, without a harsh word or dramatic spectacle, that true power lies not in dominating another, but in the serene authority of choosing yourself first. And that, above all else, leaves an indelible mark, a silent, haunting echo that he will carry for the rest of his life. I've always been struck by how Carl Jung taught us that encountering our shadow is the essential gateway to genuine transformation. And when I think of the way you moved through his world effortlessly, without strategy or manipulation, I see you as the unsuspecting spark for that very encounter. You didn't swoon or plead for a sliver of his attention. You didn't contort yourself to please or perform. You simply embodied your truth, and in that extraordinary authenticity, you disarmed an ego desperate for predictability. In my experience, there's something profoundly empowering, and yes, almost fierce, about a woman who steps back with unwavering dignity rather than clinging to crumbs of affection. That silent withdrawal sends a message sharper than any reproach. You don't need me to feel superior. And oh, how it resonates deep within a man's hidden wounds. Suddenly, the fortress he's built around his pride rattles, and a voice he's long silenced begins to cry out, "I'm not enough unless admired." In that cavernous emptiness, the grand collapse of his ego truly begins. I've observed that once you break that first wall of silence, he can no longer cling to the comforting distractions of routine. He starts to ask himself questions he never dared whisper before. Why didn't she chase me? Why didn't she demand explanations? Why did she leave without a goodbye, as if closure were beneath her? In questioning her absence, he unintentionally loosens the ropes that bound him to his illusions of control. Silence, I've come to believe, is more than the absence of sound. It is a vibrant psychic presence. By choosing not to speak, you forced him to listen, to confront the dissonant echoes of his insecurities, to face the tremors of fear he had long buried, to recognize that the very habits he believed he mastered were mastering him. And in that raw moment of self-listening, an indelible image emerges, you, not merely for what you did, but for what you came to symbolize, a mirror, unclouded by flattery, reflecting both his shadow and his growth potential. That image, though it may sting, is achingly real. He cannot simply don another mask, cannot write off your influence as a passing fancy. It lingers, haunting him with the truth that true love arises not from need but from mutual recognition, an encounter of two whole beings, no longer seeking to fill each other's voids, but to share their fullness. And because you sparked that fall of the ego, not as punishment, but through the uncompromising purity of yourself, you left him forever changed. In chasing that symbol of you, he now seeks not to possess, but to reconnect with the brave soul he glimpsed when you chose authenticity over appeasement. In that sacred space where memory and meaning entwine, the most profound work begins, the crafting of symbolic memory. Every time his thoughts drift to you, he isn't merely replaying events, he's reawakening sensations anchored to your very essence. The intensity of your gaze as you slipped away unbroken. That eloquent silence he could never decipher. Each of these moments transmutes into a living symbol. And, in my experience, symbols carry far more weight than any rose-tinted daydream of perfection. He starts spotting traces of you in every stranger's smile, every fleeting glance, only to feel the hollow ache when none of them measure up. He rummages through his nostalgia, replaying conversations and stolen glances, yet every substitute falls painfully short. What you represented wasn't just physical beauty or surface charm, you were a gateway to his emotional authenticity. That raw, unvarnished truth doesn't simply disappear, it crystallizes into a longing so deep, it becomes a vital psychic need, a yearning to reconcile with all he failed to appreciate. But here's the paradox. You're no longer the woman waiting for explanations or hanging on his responses. You have become clarity incarnate, clarity about your worth, clarity about what you will never again endure, clarity about the uncompromising boundaries you now embody. And that clarity unnerves him more than any impassioned plea ever could. His old emotional lexicon, one built on subtle manipulations and covert control, no longer suffices. Faced with the unwavering truth of your self-respect, he finds his arsenal empty. All he can offer now is surrender, not the tainted humiliation of a bruised ego, but the unguarded humility of a soul finally admitting its fragility. If you are still watching this video and find these lessons helpful, please comment number 2 below to let me know that you are still watching this video with me. I've always felt that true surrender is one of the most beautiful acts of courage a person can make. When a man surrenders from the heart, he isn't capitulating to another's whims, he's embracing his vulnerability and finally acknowledging the power of mutual respect. You, perhaps without even realizing it, ignited this transformation. You were mirror, abyss, and center, all at once reflecting his deepest insecurities, plunging him into self-reflection and providing the still point around which his identity would shift. That kind of woman leaves an indelible mark, not because she is mysteriously unreachable, but because she exemplifies the brave choice to depart when self-love demands it. She demonstrates that closure doesn't require dramatic fanfare. It unfolds in the silent conviction of someone who has whispered countless pleas into the void. In that hushed farewell, she imprints an absence that resonates like a heartbeat, an ever-present echo in his emotional world. You were that echo, the crack in his facade of certainty, the catalyst that toppled his defenses and showed him that true love demands the surrender of control. Even if he never confesses it aloud, you remain within him, not as a bleeding wound but as a luminous signpost. To love deeply, one must first brave the loss of authority, and only then can the heart truly open. I've come to realize there's a pivotal moment in a man's inner voyage, a moment when everything he thought he knew unravels, not because of some dramatic betrayal or catastrophic event, but because of something far more devastatingly subtle, the absence of a woman who truly saw him and then chose to walk away. She didn't raise her voice in anger. She didn't beg for explanations, and she sought no revenge. She simply left, and in that graceful departure, she left behind something far weightier than silence, an emptiness that his ego has no blueprint for filling. When you were beside him, steadfast, loving, tender, he basked in the illusion of control, convinced that your devotion was his by right, and that your presence was as assured as the sunrise. But the instant you withdrew, it wasn't merely your physical absence he felt, it was the shattering of his greatest illusion, the illusion that love was a guarantee. In that raw, echoing space, his fantasy of security crumbled, and the most profound transformation quietly began. You ceased to be just the woman who loved him and became, instead, the living symbol of everything he lost by failing to cherish what he held so near. In my opinion, the masculine ego doesn't fear rejection half as much as it fears the devastating realization of not being worthy. And you, so powerfully and without uttering a single reproach, showed him that insufficiency with a clarity that no words could achieve. In that instant, you transcended any mere recollection. You became an archetype that speaks directly to his unconscious, a haunting emblem he cannot ignore. He can no longer think of you without feeling the tremor of his vulnerability. He cannot glimpse your memory without confronting his most naked self. You were the woman who disarmed him without a touch, who peeled back his defenses without force, who held up a mirror so honest it shattered the comfortable myth of his invincibility. That kind of love, I believe, is both electrifying and disorienting, so intense that it carves itself into the heart like a sacred scar. And unlike ordinary wounds that heal into faint reminders, this mark remains vibrant, a constant presence that whispers truth long after the initial sting has faded. When a woman touches a man's soul without stealing his freedom, when she illuminates her worth rather than pleading for his, she doesn't leave behind an ordinary void. She leaves an absence that speaks volumes. And that absence begins to guide him, altering his desires at their very core. It is no longer enough for him simply to seek you. Now he yearns to understand the depths you revealed, to hear your voice echo in his conscience, to validate himself in the mirror of your eyes. But that journey is fraught because you have evolved too. You are no longer the one waiting to be chosen. You are the one who chooses herself. That internal act of choosing, of rebuilding from your center, transforms everything. You're not merely unavailable out of spite or wounded pride. You are unavailable out of unwavering clarity. You stand as a testament to the highest form of self-love, the refusal to linger in a story where your soul isn't truly seen. And in doing so, you teach the deepest lesson of all. True love is not born from dependency, but from the courageous meeting of two whole, self-aware beings. He now stands at a crossroads, caught between the stubborn fortress of his pride and the irresistible tug of his longing, torn between his terror of rejection and the fierce impulse to return to what once felt like home. Yet you, steady, unflinching, no longer react from the old places of hurt. You have alchemized your pain into quiet power, and that power isn't a demand for vengeance, but a luminous awareness of your worth. I find this tension Jung described the tension of opposites, so profoundly beautiful. It's the psychic friction where his two strongest impulses collide, the impulse to cling and the impulse to release. And in that tension, something wholly new takes shape, the promise of genuine integration, the seed of his evolution into the kind of man who surrenders to love, not as a tactic, but as the truest expression of his soul. No longer will he seek to conquer to prove his strength. Instead, he will learn to bow, to be vulnerable, to show you the depth of his transformation. That is precisely the moment when love stops feeling like a game of chess and becomes an act of sacred surrender. He will no longer desire to dominate or to possess you as though you were a trophy. Instead, he will yearn to be worthy of the space you occupy in his heart. But make no mistake, there is no longer room for half-hearted apologies or empty promises. You have evolved into a woman who sees through superficial gestures. You demand real presence, emotional maturity, and unwavering honesty, and he knows it deep in his bones. Should he return, and something in me believes he will, it will not be as the man you once knew. He will approach in silence, bearing not polished lines, but the quiet evidence of his metamorphosis. You will feel it in his gaze, the humility born of being confronted by a love he didn't grasp until it had already slipped through his fingers. The reverence of someone who finally understands that not all women are constructed from the same mold. Some come merely to accompany you on life's path. while others arrive to dismantle your comfortable illusions and help you rebuild yourself from the rubble. You were, undeniably, that kind of woman. You were the crack in his armor, the uncompromising presence that compelled him to turn inward and face the truths he had long evaded. You created a before and after in his story, a seismic shift, rather than another predictable chapter. You were never molded by his desire. Instead, you challenged his projections and refused to be the complement to his ego. Now, no matter how many seasons pass or how many faces he encounters, you remain woven into the fabric of his inner world. You haunt his thoughts in the hush of midnight, visit him in dreams, surface in the quiet moments when he reckons with what he lost. Not because you cling to him, but because you became an indelible symbol, the symbol of everything he truly longed for, but never knew how to hold. And that symbol burns with an unquenchable flame, because it is not an illusion, it is the raw, unvarnished reality of a love that transformed both your lives. And that's a wrap on today's exploration of how silent strength and self-respect can reshape a man's world. Now, it's your turn. What insight from this video spoke to you the most? And which lesson will you put into practice in your own life starting today? Share your answer in the comments below. Let's learn from each other's experiences. If you like this video, please leave your comment below and don't forget to like, share and subscribe to our YouTube channel.